Hi, my name is Amanda Burton, and I want to thank you for joining me for my demonstration lesson. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, my presentation is called Picture This, Pre-Writing Techniques for Narrative Writing. I'll try. All right, you got a good view now. I'm really excited about presenting this. I'm pretty passionate about writing and children writing stories, and so I'm just going to share with you some great writing techniques or pre-writing techniques. While we're together, we are going to do some brainstorming. Hopefully, well, not really sharing, but some maybe some virtual sharing. We're going to ask questions. We'll be drawing. We'll be writing. This session was originally designed to be taught in the classroom and definitely shared with students. So for the sharing portion, if you have access to a partner, please grab him or her. This partner could be a spouse, a roommate, even one of your children. But it's just a really powerful piece, and I don't want you to miss out on anything. So as far as our drawing goes, I recommend using colored pencils, but you'll have some opportunities to get those together before you need them. All right, so looks like I'm going the wrong way here. Okay, so a little bit about me. I began teaching back in 2002 in Warren County, and the bulk of my time in Warren County was spent with striving readers and writers through the Title I program, and I loved every minute of it. In 2013, I had the opportunity to come to Winchester City, and so I've been teaching there ever since, always language arts inclusion to sixth graders. This coming year, I have a new opportunity to work with a different group of students, and I'm pretty excited about that, a little nervous, but I think more excited than anything. I did receive my undergraduate from UNC Asheville, and then my master's degree from Walden University. And I finished up the writing project back in June, and just loved every minute of that. I'm really excited to see where my work with the program takes me. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, still wrong way again. Okay, so we're going to talk about trouble today. And when I think about trouble in my life, I always tend to think about my kids. Sometimes they're called the triple threat. But featured here are Amelia, Mason, and Silas. And this picture is pretty special to me, although when I first took it, I found my kids to be horribly annoying, but it's pretty special to me because it does seem to represent their true personalities. I remember when my husband gave me this really nice camera, he said, Amanda, I think you should start photographing the kids. And so that's what we did. My hope was to put my kids on this bench in Blandy Farm, or at Blandy Farm, and just take a beautiful picture. And of course, they had other things in mind. But yeah, when I look at this picture, I think, yep, there's trouble. Let's move on. Okay. All right, so now I want you to think of trouble. I want you to take the next few moments to think of times in your life in which you've experienced trouble. Try and think back to the trouble you experienced when you were your students' ages. And I want you to begin listing your trouble ideas in your day books or whatever you're taking notes on today. I'm going to kind of put my teacher hat on now. When I do this in the classroom, I usually give my students, a minute or two to just quietly think. I might have some music playing in the background, but I just try and leave them alone with their thoughts. And then after a certain amount of time has passed, I will start modeling my think aloud to help them with their thoughts and their ideas. So I'm going to do the same thing with you. So if you'll go ahead and pause your screen and list out your ideas. Then when you rejoin me, I'll have my think aloud cloud for you, but I'll also be reading aloud the list so you don't have to, twist your head or anything to see what I've written. All right, so I will see you in a few minutes on the next slide. Thank you. Okay, thanks for coming back. So you were thinking about trouble, and my think aloud consists of relationships, lockers, parents, curfew, friends, pets, sports, misunderstandings, misplaced items, divorce, marriage, mistaken identity, siblings, clothing, bullying, not fitting in, school dances, chores, driving, death, sickness, reunions, taking the blame, parties, birth, homework, sleepovers, vacations, accidents, teachers, tools, temptations, cooking, cheating. So again, I try and think of some pretty heavy things because a lot of our students have some really important stories to share, but I also try to include some lighter things in my think aloud because I found that sometimes students, they just have so much going on in their life that they just don't need to talk about the heavy things any more than they have to. So if I said something that sparked a memory for you, please add it to your list. But we're gonna dig deeper with some questions right now. So if you have a neighbor or a partner, I want you to verbally share your brainstorm with your neighbor. I don't want you to just hand them your list. I actually want you to read your list out loud. And then neighbors or partners, I want you to write out a couple of questions you have about your partner's list on a Post-it note. And then I want you to discuss your questions and just have conversations about your questions and your responses. But this is a pretty powerful pre-writing technique. So if you'll pause and oh, I'm sorry. If you don't have a partner, what I want you to do is try and anticipate any questions that a imaginary partner might have for you. Now, as a teacher, what I'm doing at this point is my students have either been paired up or they might be working, well, I don't know, this year I'm working virtually. I guess they'll have to work with a neighbor and maybe talk a little louder than what they would have in the past. But what I would be doing is circulating the room. And if I see a pause in conversation or see some partners that might have a stalled conversation, I might lean in and try and jumpstart things. But I think my role during this time would just be to circulate the room and just listen in and see how I can help out. All right. All right, so I want to talk about some research behind conversation. My first bit of research comes from Laura Robb. I'll move my little talking head there. She says, talk has an uncanny way of reclaiming events and ideas from the deepest recesses of our mind. Her work came from, or that particular quote came from Teaching Middle School Writers, What Every English Teacher Needs to Know. I've had the opportunity over the past few years to work with Laura Robb from time to time, and I can just tell you she has a deep passion for writing and reading, loves children, and I just noticed that I tend to sit up a little straighter around her and pay more attention, and I know that everything she says is really, it's just good stuff, so I really try and take it to heart. But there's other researchers who have some important things to say about talk, or questions, I should say. The first group of researchers I want to focus on are Lucy Calkins and her colleagues. They say hearing ideas from other students will help trigger memories. This particular work comes from Up the Ladder, Accessing Grades 3 through 6 Narrative Units of Study. Winchester City purchased these narrative units of study a few years back, so it's been neat to comb through them and incorporate some of their strategies into our class, and there's some real gems in there. So that's been exciting to, to learn from this group of researchers and incorporate what they're saying into my work. Sorry guys, we'll go back here. And then the other group of researcher, or actually is going back to Laura Robb. She says writers should be encouraged to use their partner's questions to add more details to their brainstorm and generate ideas for writing. And that quote also comes from Teaching Middle School Writers. All right, so you have this, hopefully a ginormous list in front of you of trouble topics. Right now, I want you to select a topic. And then we're gonna draw. So we've come to the fun part. When you are drawing, I encourage you to use colored pencils. And I say that because I found that with my students, when they use colored pencils, they tend to be a little more careful, a little more deliberate in their drawings, take a little more pride in them. And I've noticed that many of my students' writing has improved greatly because they were able to draw. But I'll talk a little more about that and the research behind it in a little while. What I'd like for you to do in just a moment is get a blank sheet of paper, and I want you to divide your paper into 3 sections. Label one part at the beginning, the next part the middle, and of course the third part the end. And I want you to draw out your story. Again, I recommend colored pencils. I give my students, well, let's see, I gave my 6th graders about 20-25 minutes for this. I gave my colleagues when in the writing project just 15 minutes, and they seem to do just fine. So when you pause, I would say take as long as you need, but I don't really think it'll take you more than 15 minutes. So I will, if you'll pause, and I'll see you again on the next slide. Okay, I'm back, and thank you for joining me. If you have a partner, I want you to share your drawing with your partner, and I want you to tell your story. If you don't have a partner, what I want you to do is take a look at your drawing, and I want you to share or tell your story out loud to yourself. As a teacher, what I would be doing in class with my 6th graders right now is, as they're sharing their drawings with their partners, I would just circulate the room, try and listen in from group to group. If I see that a particular group is struggling or just stalled out, I would probably sit with them, but socially distant, and just help encourage them to share their drawings. I'd probably start asking questions about what they featured. But I think that's how teachers should handle themselves when students are sharing out their drawings with their partners. All right, so if you haven't paused and done that yet, go ahead and do so, and then I'll join you on the next slide. Okay, thanks for coming back. Okay, so here's what the research says about drawing. Move my little face out of the way. Okay. So in Ralph Fletcher's book, Joy Write, Cultivating High Impact, Low Stakes Writing, he says it's helpful to expand your definition of writing to include drawing, sketching, and doodling. Drawing can be a soothing, centering activity. It acts as a rehearsal for writing. And again, with my own students, I've seen just a lot of improvements when they were able to draw first. The second researcher I want to focus on is named, let's see, her name is Yuki Turida. I believe that's how it's, I'm not really sure how to say her name, so that's my best guess. But she says, drawing is active. It causes writers to reconstruct what they are learning in a way that makes sense to them. And this came from an article published in Edutopia, and her article was called The Science of Drawing and Memory. Okay, so you've had an opportunity to brainstorm, you selected your topic, you drew your story, and now it's time for writing. So hopefully if you had a partner, you just shared out the beginning, middle, and end of your story. And now what I want you to do is to write your story. I gave my colleagues in the writing project 20 minutes for writing their story. That seemed to be enough time for them. I gave my sixth graders about 45 minutes or so. Some needed additional time. Some finished up maybe a little early, but that's what I would recommend for students. And then 20 minutes for colleagues. I think you'll find that your drawings will provide yourself with useful reminders of events and details. So if I could have you just pause, take your time for writing, and then join me once you have finished. I've got some student samples to share with you. Oh, I should tell you what I would do during this time with my students. When my students are writing, I found that if I am sitting and also writing, they tend to take the activity much more seriously. There's not as much nonsense going on. It's really been powerful. So usually when my students are writing, I'm also sitting and writing as well. But I probably after about 10 minutes or so, I would get up and circulate the room, check in on students who seem to need a little more help than others. But I think it's important to just give students time to write, and I would keep this as protected time. Okay, so go ahead and pause. I'm anxious to hear about your stories during our question and answer session, but enjoy your writing, and I'll join you on the next slide. Okay, thanks for coming back. So let's talk about the influence of drawing and what the research says. There was a study published back in 1997 by Edith Norris and her colleagues, and this study was published in Reading Horizons, a journal of literacy and language arts. And what they did was they took two groups of third graders. One group of third graders, they were allowed to, they were encouraged to draw prior to writing. Whereas the other group, they did not do any type of drawing, they just started writing stories. And what the researchers found was that those students who were drawing prior to writing, they wrote significantly longer and they had better stories. They had more ideas. They experienced higher writing performance. Both boys and girls experienced the same results. And they found, and I guess the researchers and teachers found that integrating drawing and writing may be used as a fun motivational tool. So I thought that was pretty handy, both for my project, but just knowing that drawing really is helpful and research-based. All right, so I want to talk with you about some writing and drawings that some of my students did. The first sample that I want to share with you comes from one of my striving readers and writers from last year. He was writing about a kidney stone that he experienced when he was 7 years old. I think what impressed me the most about his writing is that when I think about the year, this was the most writing that he turned in. And I found that his writing had detail, it had dialogue, and it was just much better than what he would typically turn in. And then he, when I asked him, why was this so much better than what you generally turn in? He said, the best part about drawing was that if you drew your pictures first, it would help bring back the words, because when my story happened, it was a long time ago. I want to share two more examples with you. This next example, my student featured here, it was a little closer to grade level with her reading and writing, but I've found that she put a lot more detail into her drawings, and she actually wrote quite a bit more than she typically did. She put a lot of hard work into her drawings, and I really appreciate that. And I think she did too, because like I said, her work was greatly improved. The last sample that I want to share with you comes from a student who was very close to reading on grade level and writing on grade level. But I noticed in his writing, he typically did not include a lot of detail. But here in the second paragraph, he says, "We saw all the reds and oranges in the leaves. There was a cool breeze running past our faces. We saw many different animals, mostly deer. They looked as if they were gliding in the air with clouds on their feet." Um, Again, I thought that was pretty incredible for him. Um, and I just think that the drawing was very beneficial for him. So what I want you to do now is take your story. I'll move my, take your story, and if you have a partner, I want you to read aloud your story to your partner and then switch roles. If you don't have a partner, I want you to read your story out loud to yourself. As a teacher, actually, before you start sharing, as a teacher, when my students are sharing with their partners, again, I would probably just circulate the room and sit in and listen to some great stories. I would also invite my students to volunteer to share. I typically around Halloween, I have actually on Halloween, if Halloween falls within school days, I have a sip and share with my students, and that's where I invite them to read some of the writing they're most proud of. And so they, we always have cookies and hot cider, and it's just it's a lot of fun, and it helps combat the, I don't know, the craziness of Halloween in school. So if you would go ahead and pause, share your story with your partner, or just read aloud to yourself, and I will join you when you're ready. Okay, so you had a chance to read your story. I want to share with you some additional drawing opportunities. You could have your students sketch out a map of their childhood neighborhood. I've done this before, and I promise you one memory definitely leads to another. You could have your students draw important events of narratives prior to writing assignments. You could also have them pair academics and art when students create their own books. Students may create travel journals for themselves or for the characters they are reading about. Your writers could also create comic books or graphics to tell stories or describe events, or they could also create interactive notebooks that could be used for notes. Students can personalize their notebooks by adding drawings, diagrams, and charts. All right, so during our time today, we've done a lot of pre-writing techniques. You've brainstormed. We had the option to question our partner and have questions asked of us. We've drawn the beginning, the middle, and the end of our stories, and we've also written a story. So we packed a lot during our session today. But right now I want you to think about how drawing prior to writing could be beneficial to your writers, and how you could use this strategy in your classes. So if you take a few moments just to jot down your ideas and the notes that you're taking, because I would hate for you to just lose an idea between now and, between now and the time it takes to go back to your class, or between now and just whenever you might use some of these strategies. So go ahead and pause, do that, and I'll see you on the final slide. Okay, guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining me for my presentation. If you have questions or you just want to share your story with me, I would love to hear it. I signed up for my Zoom time slot on September 12th is from 9:45 to 10 o'clock, and I look forward to meeting you then and answering any kind of questions that you have. In the meantime, I wish you a very safe and healthy school year. I hope it's a good one for all of us, and I wish you great writing opportunities for your students. And again, thank you for joining me.